morning. My name is Hossana. I'm going to be refuting the claim of racial discrimination. Law enforcement's practices are ongoing and backed up by the law. The advocates supported this claim by 3 supporting claims. One of them is racial discrimination. Law enforcement agencies is integrated by the judicial system. The second one is the second supporting claim is racial discrimination. Law enforcement is still practiced today. And the third one is recent police misconduct is not an isolated evidence. I'm going to go through each point. The first point that he makes is the racial discrimination. Law enforcement agencies are integrated by the judicial system. He points out the law that was going on in 1896 versus Pesley and Ferguson, but it's flawed because it doesn't provide any evidence that we didn't already know. We already knew that there's been racial, problems in our country. We've dealt with slavery. We've dealt with a lot of racial discrimination things. Like, that's not something new. We've already knew that. So it fails to say really anything. And then his other point is when he talks about the Brown versus Board of Education in 1958. And the reasoning that he's trying to make it relevant is the time frame. And it starts saying that the law was ignored by the governor, Orville Davis. The reason why it fails to do so is that it's not backed up by the law. And actually, he didn't want to let these kids in the school yet. He tried to stop them. He did this radical thing. Yet the law, the Supreme Court, still was just like, no, you have to obey the law. Like, this is the way that it's going to be, and you have to obey. Yet the kids ended up, continuing to go to school. There is in PBS, I'm quoting Alex McBride, says, as the court declared the state's compliances with the principles of civil rights as articulated by the federal courts. So students were able to still continue to go to school after that. They probably didn't have a good time there, but they were still able to go. They got escorted into the classes for the first few months, and then I'm not sure what happened after that, but it was not supported by the law. And then his second supporting claim is racial discrimination law is still practiced today. He goes on to saying the Terry versus Ohio case, and what he fails to mention that it was in 1969, and that was over 40 years ago. So that his claim is saying that it's still going on right now. That's over 4 decades ago, so it's still no relevance. Like I said, of course, yes, we all know that there was race going on, race issues going on. For example, murder is wrong. Yes, it's wrong. It's still going on. It's not backed up by the law. There are consequences that are given if you disobey the law. And then he goes on to saying the most current case that he gave was New York City. The police accused this guy selling loose cigarettes, and they arrested him, and he said, I can't breathe, about 11 times. He ended up dying. Again, these are just cases that show people not following the law. It's not a general view of what really was trying to be happening. And then his third claim is recent police misconduct is not an isolated incident. And then he gives saying that there's people, they are, there's protests going on, and he gives examples of how people are, not blinded by this issue. And again, protests have been going on since we can all remember. It doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove anything by saying that it's not that it's not happening. If anything, when there's a lot of organizations, there's about 130 organizations that are nonprofit against anti-racial misconducts, which will include in any workforce and any schools and pretty much anywhere. Those are nonprofit. That's not including people that are making profit. There's an organization that's E-Raise. The most current case was in March 2015 in Texas, where they were agreed to settle a $12.26 million lawsuit because there was racial misconduct. In 2015, in Alaska, there was another case that they were granted because there was discrimination going in favoring Hispanics. In November 2014, there was an African American that were getting paid less and women were getting paid less. Again, like all these people have been fighting for this. It's not like they're not continuing fighting for this. In 2012, the Pepsi company did a lot of discrimination as well. When it came to filling an application, you had to say what race you were, so they weren't hiring any black people. Yet again, like it got discovered, and 3.13 million people were provided with money, so yeah, we can go back into history just on this website Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Just on the first website, like when you go into there's about 58 cases of continuing cases that they're fighting for, and these are organizations that are, against it. So I just think that it's not agreed. We agreed. Thank you. We all agree that racial discrimination is going on, but it is definitely not backed up by the law. There are consequences to every action, just as well as there's murder is wrong, yet there's consequences that you have to pay for.
All right, you tried to label the advocate's claims, and I thought you did a pretty good job on that. When you talked about the historical data, you reviewed some of the cases that have been talked about. When you keep using the phrase, it's not backed up by the law, I think you need to kind of explain what you mean, because I'm having a hard time understanding the point, and I've talked to you about it. I listened to the other argument, and it's a little bit confusing. In essence, what you're saying is that none of the examples that are being presented were accepted by the law. They were not within the legal rules. They violated the laws. And it's the exact opposite of what the advocate is saying. It's not that they were endorsed by the laws that exist. In fact, they contradicted the laws, and that's why those cases matter, because they demonstrate that we are continuing to enforce laws against discrimination. That's the point that you need to make, and I think that needs to be a little bit clearer. The way you phrase it is just a little confusing. I did like the idea where you kind of point out that some of this is pretty dated information. That's reasonable to discuss and say that changes have taken place. I think you might want to demonstrate that changes have taken place a little bit more effectively. And there are probably lots of ways to do that with the number of laws that have been put into place to address those issues. At the end, you talk about a number of cases that are currently being pursued, for instance, for anti-discrimination issues. You could talk about changes in economic status of people of color that have occurred over the years, whether their access to jobs or their general incomes have increased or something like that. Any of those sorts of things I think would strengthen the argument that you're making here. That it's old. I mean, we can do the math, 1958, 1968, 1898. We can tell that those are, for most people in here, that's ancient history. It's ancient history for most of you. One of us I can remember. 1958, 1968. And I can't remember 1958. That was a good year. I was born that year. But 1968 I remember pretty vividly, but I'm the only one in here who's going to have any memory of that kind of stuff. I did like the idea that you said, look, we've got lots of organizations that are addressing these miscues around the world. We've got lawsuits that are addressing this issue. So these violations are not embraced by the law. In fact, the law is going the opposite direction. Governor Flavius does not keep those kids out of the school. They got into the school. People who were discriminated against got compensated for the discrimination that occurred against them. People who have violated these laws get sued, they get prosecuted, and they're being investigated currently. The idea that this is officially endorsed ignores the reality of what's going on here. I think that's the way you want to kind of phrase those arguments. And the same thing that I mentioned to Jonathan about the evaluation form. You're going to see numbers on the side here. I'll try and find a form to kind of attach to it so you can kind of follow along and see what all that means.
Okay.
All right, thank you.